Good evening all, I'm Aditi Lamba with our Tuesday night segment of South Asian News, Vision of Asia. Welcome to our US Elections 2020 special episode. It is November 3rd, 2020 at 8 p.m. here on the East Coast, and Americans have cast their votes for the President, members of Congress, and in numerous state and local races across the nation. While polling centers close here on the eastern seaboard, voting continues in the West Coast with Americans wearing face masks and standing outside in a socially distanced manner for hours. So if you are watching this and polls are still open wherever you are, please go and vote. Vote for equality, economic growth, and respect for all communities. Vote to have your voice count in this election. This year, we are looking at an unprecedented number of early and mail-in ballots cast, totaling more than 102 million as of filming this program. Along with the uncertainty of the coronavirus pandemic, the lack of consistency about how these votes will be counted, and the almost certain legal battles to come, the outcome of this 2020 US presidential election is one of the hardest to predict. While Americans cast their vote today and mark the end of arguably the most contentious presidential race in history, the question is not just whether Republican President Donald Trump will win a second term or be defeated by his rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. The question is also when the results will be known to the general public. Currently, the latest polls show that the race is very close in battleground states such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Texas, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida. Some of these states will not begin to count early votes until after polling stations are closed, and some will allow for ballots that arrive after Election Day to be included as long as they are postmarked by November 3rd. So if this presidential race depends upon the outcomes of these states, America could be waiting for days for the final result of the presidential race. This is happening while many major cities have braced themselves for potential unrest after tonight, with stores taking anti-riot and anti-looting measures in many city centers, reminding us of the two major shaping 2020's polarizing election issue: COVID-19 ravaging parts of the country after a summer of protests against police brutality. So where is the South Asian community standing in all of this? And how crucial of a part have we played in this election? Tonight we have political leaders and advocates addressing our community on election campaigns and the importance of voting, along with their prediction of what will happen after tonight. Let's begin our show with glimpses of our conversation with New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. New Jersey as a state has done something totally different in comparison to several states across the nation. Everything is being done by ballots that were mailed to all the New Jersey residents that were eligible to vote and registered. Could you please go through how you're maintaining the security of these ballots, especially in the drop boxes? They have been messed up with in different states. How are you ensuring and protecting the voice of everybody in this election?
Great question. And by the way, so far, this is with a week still to go to the actual election date, an overwhelming success. We've already gotten, I think, something like 2.7 million ballots have been received by our county clerks, and there were only 3.9 million ballots in the entire election in 2016. So that's so far, that's a really good, impressive number, frankly, exceeding any of our highest expectations. So everybody got a ballot, assuming you were registered. And you have sort of 5 different choices here. One is to put it in the post office, and you can track your ballot not through the Postal Service, but you can track it that it was received by your county clerk, and you go online to do that. Secondly, if you don't want to mail it, you could drop it in one of these secure boxes. And by the way, they're all in strategic locations with camera surveillance, and there are almost 300 of them around the state. 5 out of our 6 members are eligible to vote. We all dropped them in a box together a couple of weeks ago. The next choice you have is to deliver it to your county clerk, or on election day, you could deliver it to a poll worker. If you don't like any of those 4 choices, you can actually show up and vote in person. We've asked each county to have at least 50% voting capacity on November 3rd, each municipality to have at least 1 location. And we think that hybrid model balances both Aditi public health on the one hand, and the sacred right to vote, which is at the core of democracy, on the other.
Exactly. Lastly, I have to ask you this. There is a fear of a backlash after the election day. With the racial unrest that we've already seen in the nation, it's quite concerning. Are you prepared for a backlash or some kind of a negative impact of the elections on the state? And what are you doing in order to protect all the residents?
Yeah, I mean, we are, I would say, prepared. We hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But I have to say I'm an optimist. Regardless of who wins the election on Tuesday, and I know there's a lot of noise about what will happen and all of that. I think if President Trump wins, he'll have an extension, another term of his presidency. If Vice President Biden wins, I believe with all my heart that cooler heads will prevail, common ground will be found across the aisle, and there will be a peaceful transition of power. So I'm an optimist. We've done this throughout the history of our republic. Time and time and time again. We are the greatest nation on earth, but we're hardly perfect, that's for sure. But we try to perfect ourselves every day. But as it relates to reacting and responding in the aftermath of elections as a country, overwhelmingly, we've done the right thing, and I'm optimistic we'll do the right thing next week.
How is the momentum in your district, and how are people feeling? What are you focused on?
Well, I think that people are feeling good. I'm feeling good. I'm going for my third term on November 3rd. As I like to say, I'm trying to go 3 for 3 on November 3. And so I think it's going well. And I look forward to joining the new Congress. And, hopefully tomorrow is a turning point in a positive way for the entire country.
You know, Congressman, if I was to ask you, what are some issues you think are at stake for the audience to know more, what would you say?
I think there are a few issues that are at stake. One is, are we ready to hire somebody to be president and the majority party to finally kill the coronavirus? We have to end this pandemic and the health crisis associated with it. The second is, are we ready to hire somebody who's going to help repair the damage to our economy and make sure that we come out of this better than we were before? One where we have inclusive growth and inclusive economic growth across the board. And then the third question is, do we want to unify as a country, or do we want to continue to divide? I think we should unify. And that's why I think that Joe Biden, as well as the Democratic Party, are poised for good things tomorrow night.
You are a South Asian network. I would love for you to address the community on importance of voting and perhaps the importance of how we play a pivotal role in this election.
Well, it turns out that there are 500,000 South Asian voters in the battleground states. And the reason why that matters is because each of those battleground states will be decided by, thousands of votes, not millions of votes. And so South Asian voters could provide the difference, whether it's in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania or Florida or North Carolina. South Asian voters need to vote, and that is paramount. And so today, make a plan, make sure that your friends, family, and loved ones make a plan, and get out there and vote. This is our duty. We have to do it.
It's time for a short break on Vision of Asia South Asian News segment. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Vision of Asia Election 2020 special episode. We again urge all in the West Coast to continue voting before polls are closed. President Trump has time and time created this caution or this uncertainty about mail-in ballots. Are you also in that concern, or do you totally trust the mail-in ballot system?
No, I mean, it's a way to discourage voters and pander to his base, because who are the people who are actually doing that, right? So no, there's absolutely, and in fact, science is, the facts of the research has shown, the facts have shown there's no concern of fraud with regard to mail-in ballots or any of that nature. So it's a complete farce. No, we're not concerned about that. And in fact, if that's the way that people choose to vote, we absolutely support that in these times.
Neha, for the next couple of days, while you are coming towards the end of this cycle, what are you focused on with South Asians for Biden?
Oh, we are just getting out the vote at this point. We have phone banks after phone banks scheduled. We also have our final event that is scheduled for this Sunday, November 1st, where we will get very, very prominent members of the South Asian community to talk about what's at stake with the respective fields. But really, it's just GOTV between now and then, and making sure that we are tagging people who then tag people who then tag people to ensure that they are voting.
You know, Neha, if I was to ask you, how has this personally been for you, what would you say?
It's been very rewarding. I mean, it's been challenging at times. It's been exhausting, but it's been absolutely phenomenal. I'm so proud to support this ticket. To finally, after 4 years, I finally have hope, and I have done anything and everything that I could, and along with my team, to make sure that we carry over that hope across the finish line, because that's really what's been driving us. And the fact that this campaign actually speaks to us, cares about us, considers us, has been really empowering, because we've just been ignored. We've been sort of spit on. We've been told that our countries are filthy, or that they are not, the traditional Nordic countries, so they don't really care. No, we are actually being seen and heard. We have somebody who looks like us who's on the ticket. I mean, that's significant.
I just have 2 questions left for you here. What, according to you, are South Asians learning from this election?
That the power of voting, that their voice actually matters, and also that we are a critical voting bloc at this point, so that politicians are paying attention to us in ways that they haven't before. And what I've also found is that a lot of South Asians who were just apathetic before, were never involved, regardless of which side of the aisle they're on, are actually getting involved, which is significant. And so it's very heartening for me to see for our community as well.
My last question to you has to be about voting again. For a person who may be choosing not to vote, we saw a lot of that in 2016. What do you say to them, Neha?
Not an option. It is absolutely not an option. There are so many people who come here to this country and wait and wait and wait for the right to vote, and people just are born into that. That's not an option. This is your way to act. If you don't vote, you can't complain, and you've had complaints over the last 4 years. You've got to make your voice heard. It's just not an option.
Well, Neha, thank you so much for your time here on ITV Gold. Please give a last message out on behalf of South Asians for Biden.
Please join us in voting, whichever way that you feel comfortable. If it is that you are choosing to mail, please make sure that you are in a state where that is actually going to be counted, because there are some states where it's not going to be counted by election day. But please exercise your right to vote and vote for the Biden-Harris ticket, because that is one that absolutely looks out for our community.
What are your biggest concerns right now as a political analyst?
Voter suppression to some extent. I don't think all of it is malicious. I think some of it is incompetence. But we have seen time and time again in Georgia of things just not getting done properly. In the primaries, we had long lines, not because of huge turnout, but because things like machines were down. Gwinnett County, which is one of the fastest turning counties in terms of turning from red to blue, their machines were put on a truck that didn't fit them. Therefore, when the polling locations opened, they didn't have machines because they didn't have a truck big enough to get the machines from the election board office to the polling centers. Things like this show a massive level of incompetence to the point that it starts looking like it was done on purpose. So I am worried about voter suppression. I think the amount of people who want to vote, I'm not worried about participation. I'm not worried about the energy. I am worried that somebody who is being made to stand in line for 5 hours might decide that they have better things to do because they're losing money for every hour that they're not working, or they have childcare that they need to think about. That is my major concern with this election, especially in Georgia, making sure that people are getting accurate information about mail-in voting, that we're not demonizing mail-in voting the way we have in the past months because of the president. Now, Georgia has never needed an excuse to vote early or to do early voting. But because of the narrative that's coming from the White House, now I'm seeing a lot of Republicans suggest that Democrats are pushing for early voting so that we can mess with the votes, which is a horrible conspiracy theory. It really affects our morale as a democracy. So voter suppression and misinformation, definitely 2 of the biggest things that I'm concerned about, especially in Georgia.
And it's time for the short break on Vision of Asia Election 2020 special. Come right back to us. Welcome back. This is Vision of Asia Elections 2020 special. Let's continue to see what leaders have discussed with us on this crucial election.
Sure that the rights we've earned as immigrants, as women, as people of color, as workers remain protected. And so for me, when folks go out and people go out to the polls, whether it's in my, assembly, Senate, Congress, or president, those are the things you need to look at. Who respects you as an immigrant, as a human, as a person, someone who's contributing to the community, and who's going to fight for your survival, the survival of your family, and ultimately the success of our community.
Who, according to you, would be perhaps the significant voters in these elections? Who are you looking at as in communities to really go out and advocate their voice?
So I like to see, there's the general answer would be, well, young people, they should go out and vote. I actually think that one of the most powerful votes are the aunts and aunties in the community, the people who have been forging the small businesses, who have been forging the trajectory for people like you and I, who have been in our country for decades, and who need to make sure that tomorrow we have a place that we can still call our country and our home. Because these are the folks who left other countries where our vote was not respected, and often it was actually dangerous to vote. And so I want to see the aunts and aunties who generally stay home and don't vote, the folks over 50 who don't always understand the need to vote because maybe they say this doesn't really affect me, be as powerful and as loud of a voice when it comes to casting their vote as young people in their 20s and in their 30s. They deserve to be heard just as much.
Many are also saying that the Black votes and the Latinx votes will play a major role in perhaps the swing states as well as other states, that we're also looking at. What is your personal take on it?
Look, I think we have seen in the last congressionals and presidential race 4 years ago that the Latino and the Black vote are extremely important in these swing states. And I'm hoping that these are the folks who understand the power that they began to harness and will go out this time and still exercise that right to vote. But I don't want it to just be about us. I want to see non-traditional voters like the South Asian community go out, like the Muslim voter, go out and make sure that they're casting their vote. Because the same way that we've been fighting to have the power of the Latino and the Black vote be recognized for decades, and finally now it's getting seen, this is a place where we can start to make sure that the South Asian, the Muslim vote, the vote of the uncles and the aunties can be recognized as powerful. So we have to start now.
Senator Harris is also half South Asian and she is half African American. How do you think people are looking at her, and what kind of message do you think she's sending across?
I think she's a real source of inspiration for so many people. She represents the future multiracial, multi-ethnic America. She's got an inspiring story. She's proud of her story. She's embraced her story, unlike some other politicians who run away from theirs. And I think she's going to shatter a barrier that's long overdue to be broken.
I'd like your comments on how have you looked at both the campaigns that we have seen, this cycle. What are your comments on the Republican campaign and the Trump campaign in comparison to how the Biden-Harris campaign has been going?
Well, I think the Biden-Harris campaign has been very responsible. They haven't had super spreader events. They've engaged people, but they've engaged them responsibly. I think the turnout on our side is going to be huge because you've got a lot of people who understand the need for change, and you have a campaign that's very confident that we're going to do very well in many, many states. And it's not, it's a campaign on the offense that is really going to campaign in places like Georgia and Texas, and we have a chance to have a big win.
If I was to ask you what states you're watching for that big win, what would you say?
I would say Georgia. I'd love to see Texas. I mean, it's still a little bit uphill, but I think we've got a shot at it. but those are states. I think Ohio is within reach. I think we've really put some Republican states into play.
There are also news of a possible chaos or unrest post-elections. Some people are also saying there might be riots. How are you looking at that? How are you preparing your district for that?
I don't think it will come down to that, because I think that Biden will win and it'll be pretty decisive and obvious to people. But we need to make sure that we are always advocating for peaceful protest, peaceful engagement, asking Republicans also to condemn violence, making sure social media companies are removing threats of imminent violence, and that we are working towards upholding the ideals of the Constitution. But I'm optimistic that Tuesday will give us a clear result.
Can you guarantee that all the votes that get counted in New York City, or at least in your district, will be all fair? And how are you maintaining this election protection process during the cycle?
I will fight hard to make sure that every vote is counted. I have already been fighting to do that in the primary election, where we had an incredible number of absentee ballots that were mailed in. Also, I'm in touch with election lawyers. They are on standby to help everybody and make sure that their votes are counted. I also am a liaison between my constituents and the Board of Elections to make sure that the Board of Elections answers constituent concerns. So I'm doing everything I can to make sure that everyone expresses themselves.
But you trust the system for elections this year?
I do, and I also trust our judicial system. I trust our lawyers. And I trust the people that have been standing in line for hours to make sure that they get to cast their ballot. So the people give me faith. People in my district are also tracking their ballots. There's a new ballot tracking system in New York. So voters are being very vigilant. And it is truly inspiring to see that kind of coming together and that kind of vigor in our democracy. And I also trust our brilliant election lawyers. And I trust the law, and I know that we're going to have a peaceful transition and that the votes will be counted.
What's your message to the South Asian community right now?
My message to the South Asian community is the sky is the limit for you. We showed that in our election. It was the people's victory. South Asians came out and voted for me and gave us the largest win percentage-wise of any challenger in the state. And now we will elect the first South Asian woman to the vice presidency tomorrow. So this is the time for our community to shine. So dream and dream big.
And finally, what states are you watching right now, Jennifer?
I'm watching Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida. Please, everybody, go out and vote. This is the election of a lifetime. November 3rd, 2020, go to the poll, take a selfie, enjoy it, bring back a story, and make history. Thank you.
And this wraps up our show for the night, our special edition on Election 2020. Please send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook @itvgold. You can also now subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch many of our popular shows for free. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Please go and vote.